brought to you by YDS. Have you picked up your yearbook? You should get on that.
Fortunate enough to be here with Senator Roméo Dallaire. He's here at Kingston's Writers' Fest, and he's speaking on his newest book, They Fight Like Soldiers and They Die Like Children. And I guess getting right into it, it's a very difficult topic. And what made you decide to write about child soldiers?
Personal experience during the Rwandan genocide, and then subsequently going into Sierra Leone in 2001. Near the end of that war, which was fundamentally fought by children on both sides, and desire to see how we can stop conflict in this era where we've introduced a whole new weapon system, a low technology one, but very effective, called child soldiers, or the use of children.
And why do you believe it's risen, or the levels of child soldiers have risen so dramatically recently?
Well, first of all, by the proliferation of small arms. Interestingly, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council are the biggest producers of small arms in the world. At the end of the Cold War in 1989-90, hundreds of millions of these weapons that were in operational stocks and mobilization stocks were not destroyed with the peace dividend. They were simply sold off. And so we now have hundreds of millions of light weapons that 9-year-olds can use very effectively. Lots of ammunition. And so they, linked with the fact that there are so many disenfranchised youth in many of these countries, the era of a humanitarian interventions in which adults are abusing all fundamentals of law of armed conflict and humanitarian law has made it that these are now a preferred weapon of choice. And so I think we've got to neutralize it and got to stop it.
And how are the armed forces recruiting such children?
Well, it's interesting because, as you say, there's about 31 countries who recruit massively children between 8 and 9 years old and right up to 18, which is directly against the International Convention on Child Rights and particularly the optional protocol on that. And of that, 17 of them are non-state actors, and in the 14 of them are state actors. I mean, countries actually recruiting youth 15, 14, and so on. And the recruitment is done in a number of cases forcibly, by simply going in and abducting them and so on. In other cases, it's sort of a security guarantor for the family by having one of their children, getting caught up into the recruitment process. And as such, rarely are the children actually volunteer. And in fact, you got to question whether or not it's possible to be a volunteer in a country in conflict where your own security is at risk. Your whole infrastructure has been destroyed around you. Everything referenced by your family's probably been killed off. So it's, even if they walked into a child soldier camp, it doesn't mean they're actually volunteer. They're caught up in the context of a conflict. It's like consenting adults in a war zone. It doesn't exist. Women do not consent in a war zone. They do it because they need protection. They're looking for money for their families, and in so doing, it's a crime against humanity. Finally.
And it's difficult. And the new face of war, the child soldier, how is that changing and creating challenges for standard peacekeeping missions?
In fact, that's part of the aim is to try to stop the recruitment of child soldiers, because we are facing enormous ethical and moral and at times legal dilemmas in how do you protect people how do you actually conduct your responsibilities in the mandate of a peacekeeping mission or any other conflict mission where in fact, you're facing children who are armed and are drugged up and indoctrinated and abused, fearful, and are ruthless. And so when I started my research in earnest in 2004 when I was at the Kennedy School, discovered that there is no nation that has a doctrine on how to handle child soldiers. It's essentially you are allowed self-defense and you use force as if you're facing another belligerent. Well, there's got to be a better way than simply killing kids.
And you said in an interview that the youth of today can send the message that child soldiers are humans just like we are.
Yeah.
How do you believe that Canada's future generation can help spread that message?
Well, it's interesting. When we worked on our project and that has now moved to Dalhousie, and we were looking for advocacy on that, it became evident that advocacy by the peers of those who are being recruited would probably be a very effective advocacy, and that's why we created zeroforce.org, in which we want youth of our country and other countries to be able to, through the revolution of communications, coalescing, exchanging, and in fact influencing public opinion and policy by becoming activists. And so they can do it through the coalescing of these new social media systems, and particularly by joining NGOs, non-government organizations that are dedicated to stopping the use of children in war, protection of children during conflict. And so you've got everything from UNICEF to War Child to Save the Children. There's a bunch of them that I think the Canadian youth can either join, get involved, go overseas and see what's happening in developing countries, not necessarily in a conflict zone, of course, and even create your own NGO.
Yeah. And it's a difficult topic, but it's one that certainly needs to be addressed. And I know you have to run to a lecture, so we will let you go. But if you haven't already, go pick up a copy of his book, They Fight Like Soldiers, They Die Like Children. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brought to you by YDS. Have you picked up your yearbook? You should get on that.